So today we're here with
Steve Raymond.
Steve. Where did you attend high school, and what year did you graduate?
I went to Assumption High School and I graduated in 1971. Now today, that's Central A&M. And one of the things that'd be interesting is we were arch rivals. Okay, it took the third referendum before Assumption and Moequa merged, and that would have been like merging Teutopolis and St. Anthony. Okay, so anyway, I forget what year the two merged, but I graduated from Assumption in 71.
What sports did you play in high school?
Football, basketball, and baseball.
Talk about your high school sports career from your freshman year to your senior year.
Okay, I played football 2 years. It was never my favorite sport to play, but like the first week or so of my junior year, I tore the cartilage in my knee in PE class. And so I didn't play football my last 2 years. Baseball, because my dad owned a small weekly paper, Assumption Week when Macon, and at that time business wasn't really good. And so in the spring, my freshman, sophomore year, I had to go actually went in and work for Dad. And then my junior and senior year, I played baseball. And then I played basketball 4 years. Basketball was my favorite sport and was also my best sport.
Talk about some of your teammates and your coaches.
We weren't very good, okay, in high school. I think the best year we won 10 or 11 games. One coach I had that would be familiar in the area was Bruce Manola. Bruce I know coached for a couple years at Cowden Herrick, and I'm not sure where he went from there, but Bruce was my coach my senior year in high school. Guys I played with, nobody around here probably heard of them, but Johnny Duncan, Mike Orange, John Brick, Steve Heiler, kids like that.
Talk about some of the teams and players that you played against in high school.
We were in the old Meridian Conference, and the schools then were, Tower Hill, Findlay, Moequa, Stonington, Blue Mound, Illiopolis, Nyack, Lovington, Bethany. Maroa Forsyth is like the only school from that group that's still going. Everybody else, high schools have all merged. In basketball at that time, Stonington and Blue Mound were by far the best programs. Some people may remember Jack Detro was the coach at Stonington, and Dick McDonald was the coach at Blue Mound. Those two guys are legendary coaches for that era. Football-wise, Moequa was good. Assumption was good in football. Lovington was good in football back in those days. Kids that I played against, there was a Stamball kid from Moequa that was a good player. A Dearman boy, I want to say it was Roger, but I'm not positive. He played at Findlay. And there was a kid named Hoss DeFore. I have no idea what his real first name is. He was the center at Stonington, and he was a beast. I mean, he was an absolute beast inside, and he probably was the best player that I played against in the Meridian Conference.
Talk about some of the favorite fields and gyms that you played in high school.
Well, the gyms were really small. I was playing 69, 70, 71. By far, the smallest gym I ever played in was Tower Hill. I mean, it was really tiny. Our gym wasn't very big in Assumption, and the out of bounds line, you couldn't stand out of bounds. There wasn't room. They had that red, I guess they called it a restraining line or something that ran through the gym, and you had to stand between that line and the out of bounds line to throw the ball in. In Assumption, because fans' feet would literally be over the out of bounds line on both sides, and one end, when the end of the court ended, the stage was there, and at the other end was a brick wall. And most of the gyms were very similar to that. Now, the gym of our area, at that time, Taylorville had built their new gymnasium. And for kids around in that area at that time, that would have been like playing at the Assembly Hall. That was considered the creme de la creme.
Any other stories you'd like to add during your high school career?
Like I said, we weren't very good. One thing that I remember is the Herald and Review always ran the area scoring leaders. And I don't know if they still do that or not, but they used to. And coming into what proved to be our last game, back then it was still one class in basketball. And so we started off not in the regional, but we started in the district, was the first round. And I was 22, 23, 24, something like that, points away from averaging 20 points a game. And I was not the guy that ever knew how many points I had in a game. Some guys, as soon as the final horn went off, they could tell you I had 8, I had 18, I had whatever. I was not that guy. I never knew. I made my last shot in my high school career. And as it turned out, that gave me exactly, I think we played 22 games that year. If that's the case, it'd be 440 points, whatever. But exactly a 20-point scoring average. And I believe at the time, it was just the second kid from Assumption that had ever scored 20 points a game, had averaged 20 points a game in a season. The other kid was a guy named Craig Sloan, and he was 6 years older than I am. He was a terrific player. People around here may be familiar with Sloan Implement or GSI Grain Bins. It was his father that started all that. In fact, Craig ended up running those organizations before he retired. But many people would probably say he was probably the best player ever come through Assumption.
Any awards you received in high school?
Team-wise, I was all conference. I was MVP. I led team in scoring my senior year. I won the free throw shooting award 3 years in a row. I was kind of back then I was 6'4" kid that could shoot from outside. And back then that was really unheard of. I'm a guy that wishes we had the 3-point range back then, but we did not. And so I wish we'd have been better team. I loved playing, and I always thought we had the talent to be better than we were, but we just didn't get it put together. Baseball-wise, I was first baseman and a pitcher. And my senior year, I didn't hit 400, but I was fairly close to 400, led the team in hits and home runs and RBIs and stuff like that. And so I was decent for a small high school, back then, and I loved to play.
After high school, where did you attend college?
Went to Taylor University. It's a small Christian college in Upland, Indiana. Upland's not much bigger than like Altamont. And the college was only about 1,400 students. Cornfields surrounded on three sides. But I went there, hopefully was going to play basketball there at Taylor. But anyway, my preacher at the time, I was born and raised in a little bitty country church in between Assumption and Moweaqua. If there had been 70 people there, we'd have been bulging at the seams. And my pastor had graduated from Taylor and told me about it, went over and visited, and really, really liked it there. So that's where I went to school.
Who recruited you?
Well, back then, recruiting wasn't like it is today. I probably received letters from, 16, 17 schools. Junior colleges were not like they are today, where seems like there's a JC in almost every town. In fact, Lakeland College was just getting going when I was getting out of high school. I was, I guess you call, recruited by Greenville. They probably heavier than anyone. Eureka College, Blackburn College, even had interest from Millikan. Now, I was not good enough. I couldn't have played at that level. But Millikan and what's the other? North Central was the other. So those schools, I guess you could say, yes, you could call it recruiting, although like I said, it was different. But ended up going and went to Taylor to play.
At the college level, talk about your career, including your teammates and coaches.
Well, the coach was, again, a legendary guy named Don Odell. Taylor, very small school, NAIA level. Had a very good basketball program. I went there to try to play. Went to worked at the basketball camp, the Taylor University basketball camp after I graduated from high school. My freshman year, blew out my knee again for a second time, didn't get to play. My sophomore year, I played on the JV team, and I found out that not running very fast and not being able to jump very high was not the skill set the coaches were looking for. So I was probably about seventh man on the JV team, played my sophomore year and really enjoyed that.
Talk about some of the teams and players that you played against.
Well, since I never played varsity, I have two memories from my year that I played junior varsity. Number one, every year we always played Ball State. Upland, where Taylor is, was only about 30 miles from Muncie. And we always played, and Ball State's a lot bigger than Taylor. Anyway, Taylor had never, ever beaten Ball State in the JV game, and that year we beat them. And I don't know, we had to shoot 70% that night. I think we could have drop kicked the basketball and it would have gone in. We hit everything we shot. And I remember after the game, our JV coach name was Sheldon Bassett, and we threw him in the shower. So that was cool. And the other, I got to play at Mackey Arena at Purdue.
What was that like?
that was really a neat experience. I don't know who, back then, freshmen couldn't play the NCAA level. And I know Purdue played Northwestern for the varsity game that day because they let us stay for that game. I don't know who the JV team was supposed to play. But anyway, somehow that didn't work out. And I mean, it was a last second deal. I mean, we didn't know we were going to go over there and play until like the day before, 2 days before. So we went over to play. Now, I was 6'5", okay? I was the biggest guy on our team, tallest guy, okay? I would have been shorter than Purdue guards. And we went over there to play. And I mean, we got waxed, as you can imagine. I mean, these are high school all-stars, you know, these kids, but they couldn't play varsity yet. So, but I can say 3 things. I got to play at Mackey Arena. I scored a basket at Mackey Arena. And late in the game, I got the ball, and I thought I put on quite the move. I did a head fake and got this kid up in the air. Took about 3 dribbles to the right, and I thought, okay, I got an open shot. Well, there was another 6'10", 6'11" Purdue kid, and I don't believe I've ever had a shot rejected so hard and went so far. That kid knocked that thing almost back to the stands. And anyway, so all of a sudden I realized my move really wasn't that cool. So, but that was a great experience.
So, as you said, the teams and players played against, name some of your favorite facilities in which you played.
Well, have to be Ball State and then Mackey,
Yeah.
Playing on a Big Ten floor. To this day, anytime I see there's a game at Purdue or whatever, I have that memory of, like I said, of playing on that floor. I will tell you, the baskets, we'd never played on anything that size in a gym like that. And the baskets, it was like you were playing out in the middle of a pasture, and the baskets were just hanging out there in the middle of space. We were used to that depth of field, you know, behind the baskets and see the walls and all that. I mean, it was like I said, it was just like these baskets were just suspended in air out there. And so I do remember when we first went out to warm up, I don't know how many shots we took before we ever even hit the rim. It was just so different than any place else we'd ever played. But like I said, I played in one big time arena, you know, in my life. And that, like I said, that's a really neat experience.
Now that we mentioned most of your memories, did you receive any awards in college?
No, I didn't. Like I said, I didn't play on the varsity level or anything like that. So, but I did enjoy the year that I did play JV. I did enjoy that a lot.
So switching to, you're the owner of T-Town/Effingham News Report. Describe the process of starting T-Town News Report, kind of behind the scenes.
Well, first of all, I've been around the newspaper business virtually since birth. My dad bought the newspaper that covered Assumption Week with Macon. He bought that in 1959. And so even as a 7-8-year-old boy, he was getting me up when kids were home watching Mighty Mouse and Roadrunner. Dad was taking me up to the office, you know, but I had some high-level, very important jobs. I was sweeping the floor and cleaning the sink and cleaning the toilet and stuff like that. But so I've been around the newspaper business virtually my entire life. I started January 1978. I got hired as a sports editor at the newspaper in Canton, which is about 40 miles west of Peoria, called the Daily Ledger. And that's really when, I guess you want to call it, my professional career began. I was there for about 10 years, and during that time I was a sports editor, city editor, ad rep, ad manager, general manager, and then publisher. And then I was publisher of paper in Batesville, Indiana, then Olney, and then came to Effingham in '99. I won't go into a lot of detail. I will tell you I've worked for corporate newspaper groups really since ever since about 1987. I'm not a fan of what they have done to the newspaper industry. Folks talk a lot about newspapers and struggling and want to blame it on the internet and all of that. And internet has played a role, but when corporate America took over the newspaper industry, and really you can't find many privately owned papers any longer, it ceased being about the reader. It ceased being about the community, and it really, all it was bottom line and how much money you could send into the corporate office. And I'll just leave it at that. I was becoming more and more discouraged, and I love what I do. I really, really like being in the newspaper business. I just didn't like where it was headed. And so I just felt like there's time for a change. And my wife and I discussed it at length, as you can imagine. And in June of 2012, I left the Daily News. And in August, 2 months later, I started up the Effingham Teutopolis News Report. And we just really like what we do. I accept the fact we're not a typical newspaper. We focus much more on the human interest and the feature stories. Then it was a weekly up until last August, and I'm 66 years old. I'm not getting any younger, and it just reached a point I needed to slow down a little bit. And so last August we converted to a monthly publication, and just very pleased with how that's gone, and so appreciative of the community and how they support us, and we really enjoy what we're doing.
So it sounds like you've been in business now for 6 years here in Effingham.
Be 8.
8 years.
This
8
August
years.
will be 8.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 8, not 6, yeah. So exactly what do you all cover?
Well, like I said, we're primarily a feature story type of product. We have several people describe us as a magazine in newsprint form, and that's really pretty accurate. We will have, there'll be anywhere from 15 to 18 to 19 feature stories in our paper every month. Plus, then the community sends us all kinds of information from weddings, engagements, births, obituaries, when organizations, what they're doing, people that are donating, doing something in a positive manner, giving back to the community. We do very little with meetings. That just, not saying it should be this way, but for the most part, people don't care a whole lot about that. So we're a bit of a niche publication. We think that we fill a need here, but we like to feature the local people. In fact, Tyler, not too long ago, we were trying to do some figuring, and we, to the best of our ability, we believe we have featured somewhere a little over 2,000 different people in our newspaper since we started 8 years ago. So that's,
wow. That's incredible.
We think that's kind of cool.
That's incredible. Wow. What do you enjoy so much about your job?
I love to tell people's stories. I get to meet people for the first time, or I get to know some people a little better. I've lived in several different communities, and we have discovered there are good people everywhere. And unfortunately, not enough of those people's stories are being told. And we feel, again, that's kind of a niche that we play. People are very good about letting us know about folks that have good stories to tell. But at the end of the day, the people that agree and are willing to let us tell their story, I'm just very appreciative. We do the very best job we can at presenting those stories. But that is what, I get to write feature stories, and I cover sports. As they say, life is good.
Is there any obstacles involved in writing?
Well, accurate, paramount. You've just got to be accurate in what you do. You've got to get people's names right. I do something here that not many newspapers do. For virtually every feature story we write, we send it to the person we're doing the story on. I want them to read it before it goes to print. I want to make sure that the information that we have in there is accurate. I want to make sure that it is a good representation of the people that we're doing the story about. And so we have taken that, to be accurate, we take that very serious. And we're proud of the fact, now I'm not going to say there's no mistakes. You ever figure out a way to totally eliminate human error, let me know. But we take pride in the fact that we do not have a lot of inaccuracies in our paper, and it's something we strive very hard to achieve.
List any memorable games you have covered.
Oh boy. Well, we can go way back. Probably one of the first ones. I was sports editor in Canton, and when they started the football playoffs, one of the first years, Canton had to play Peoria Manual. And the game was at Canton, and the place was absolutely packed. And Peoria Manual was heavily favored to win that game. And we're way ahead, and we had a coach then, Ron Elberg, who ran the old wing T. But every play started with somebody being in motion. Somehow, Manual's defense was able to key in on that, and they were ahead 21-0 at halftime. Coach Elberg just discontinued putting the man in motion. Now, I'm not enough to understand what that did differently, but all of a sudden it threw Manual off. Well, come down to the last minute, Manual still ahead 27-21, Canton had the ball and driving, and got inside the 10-yard line, and we had a really good running back that year, Tim Bowden. He fumbled for only the second time the whole season. They recovered like at the 2 or 3 yard line, ran out the clock. I remember that. I remember the football game Effingham played at Taylorville in 2017. Nobody expected Effingham to win. It was an odd game. Taylorville literally had like 400 yards at offense in the first half. But Terrence Hill ran a kickoff back. I think we blocked a punt and scored a touchdown. We were only down 24-17 at half, but at that point, Taylorville had been clearly the better team on the field. And the second half, Effingham came out and just took it to them. Won 50 to 35 or something. And then the next week we beat Mount Zion. Both Mount Zion and Taylorville were picked to win the conference, and Effingham beat both of them, went on to win the conference that year. The game they played against Bishop McNamara 2 years ago in the quarterfinals of the playoffs, maybe the best high school football crowd I've ever been a part of. That night out here at the Effingham football field or that afternoon rather. It was great. And again, that was a game Effingham had no chance. And I really believe had that game gone on another 4 or 5 minutes, I think Kent would have won, or Effingham would have won. And then the game last year with Murfreesboro, I don't believe I know I haven't. I've never covered a game that went from such a high where at the end of the game, our kid's going to kick the field goal, we're going to state championship. And then we fumbled, and then we got beat in overtime. That was emotionally the up and down of that game. Covering the state championship, my first state championship was when the Bulldogs, St. Anthony Bulldogs, won the Class A state championship. It was the first game of the tournament when they played Chicago Hope. I'm telling you, they could have played that team 10 times, and Chicago Hope's going to win 9. But the only game that mattered is St. Anthony beat them. Now, how? I can't explain it. But they hung around, made a couple plays into the game, and that was a thrill for me to cover my first state championship. A couple months later, T-Town boys win the state championship in baseball, and I cover a lot of really good coaches. There is no finer person than Justin Fleener, the coach at T-Town. I can't tell you the amount of respect that I have for him and the way he does his program. But anyway, covering those state championships, the T-Town girls, the 2 losses against Chicago Marshall the last 2 years at the state tournament. Both games they had a super chance to win and just let it get away at the end. But those are games you always will remember.
Any memorable players you have covered?
That St. Anthony group of Bulldogs, can I remember all their names? Cade Walsh, Adam Levitt, Alex Daters, the Helsher boy, I think it was Alex Nuxall, because the Nuxall and the Daters kid looked like they'd been twins. Those kids were a lot of fun. I remember kids like Cody Jansen and Lee Hardick, Carson Fearday, one of my favorite players to cover from the girls' side. Danielle Repking, going back a few years, enjoyed covering her and the role she played. She's the blueprint of what a point guard is supposed to be, regardless of whether it's boys or girls. Kids have personality, and they come and they also interact with me. And kids are much more well-spoken today than they were when I first started doing this 40-some years ago. But boy, if you gave me a half an hour, I could probably come up with a pretty lengthy list. Oh, I'll tell you, another kid just came to my mind, Reed Schaefer. Reed's not a star. He played with the Hearts a few years back. Nobody, and I mean nobody, played harder on the floor than Reed Schaefer did. Great attitude, great kid. And like I said, you give me a few minutes, I could probably come up with a pretty lengthy list, but there's been some terrific young men and women that have come through this. We cover Effingham, St. Anthony, and T-Town, and it's been a pleasure to cover these kids. There's some quality kids out there.
Talk about going back to the basketball season from last winter. Talk about the sectional championship game at Casey between 29-3 St. Anthony and 29-3 A&M, and what was the environment like that we were all a part of, including me?
As you know, for guys that do what we do, those are the kind of games you live for. The environment was incredible. I mean, standing room only, student bodies just going at it. Like I said, it just, regardless of what happened that night, the atmosphere, you wish you could have that every game. It was the outcome I would have predicted. I'm the guy that almost wishes St. Anthony had got beat by A&M in the Teutopolis shootout. Right then, everybody knew those two teams were headed for a sectional clash. Casey had a pretty good ball club, but it would have been a pretty good upset along the way if St. Anthony and Central A&M didn't meet for the sectional final. And it's really tough to beat a good team multiple times during the same year. And quite honestly, player for player, A&M had more talent. I mean, you don't see guys like Connor Heaton and Griffin Andricks and Jack Parody. You don't see guys with that ability all on one Class 1A team. It's very rare. But we were down, 11, 12, I think. And then St. Anthony, who I also believe is a follows the lead of their coach. Cody Rinker is an absolute bulldog, and he is never going to give up or give in. And those kids came back. They got it within 4, had the ball, and had the momentum, had the crowd. I really believe if they've been able to score again or twice, it might have been a different outcome. But unfortunately, the lid went on the basket. I think they missed their last 11, 12 shots of the game and got beat. But man, what a good team they had and a great season. And I wish we could cover those kind of games every year.
That was an incredible atmosphere, Steve. That was crazy. Walking around the gym, the stage was completely filled. You could not move. Who has helped you along the way with your job?
One guy that has had an immense impact on how I write. His name is Phil Theobald. Phil actually got his start at the newspaper in Canton, but had been gone before I ever got there. He was a sports reporter for the Peoria Journal-Star. Phil's sports stories, he started them in a featurey kind of manner. He made them interesting. And now the guts of the story is, we all write it similarly. You tell how the game went, the key parts of the game. But Phil made every one of his stories unique. And I really like that. And many, many years ago, I started trying to do the same thing. Make each game unique, make it more of a featurey intro into the game. And so he is the one guy, as far as from a work standpoint or how I write, he had more impact on me than anybody else.
So who are deep down your biggest role models?
Oh, boy. My grandfather, Everett Morrison is his name, and Gramps been dead for quite a few years. He was my best friend through high school. He was just a good man. He was a farmer, small farmer. He was back in the day you could have a small farm and still make a living. But he's been gone quite a while, and I still think of Gramps a lot. My first basketball coach, a junior high basketball coach, Carl Tankersley, he reminds me a little bit of Coach Brett Hefner here at Effingham High School. He cuts you no slack. He had an expectation level. He expected you to meet that expectation level, and if you didn't, you heard about it. But he was fair, like Coach Heff is. And he was also, Coach Tankersley was the first guy out there to tap you on the head or pat you on the butt, telling you good job. And I will never forget that. He really helped motivate me to want to be a good player. My band teacher in high school, her name was Lynn Ackerman. When I was a kid, growing up, today music's kind of, if you're a guy and you can play an instrument and sing, whatever, it's kind of cool. Back in the late 60s and early 70s, not so cool. In fact, back there, the word would have been used, sissy, would have been a lot. I played piano. And in fact, many people might be surprised by this. My first major in college, I was a piano major. And I still play today at our church. But Miss Ackerman helped me see I could be an athlete and I could also like music and play the piano, and it had nothing to do with my manhood. And once I accepted that, then it was okay. But she was also somebody very important. And my dad. My dad is the nicest guy I've ever met. I've often used this expression: if you couldn't get along with my dad, it was your fault. He was just a good guy. He set a very good example for me. He was a good Christian man. He taught me about customer service and the value of taking care of a customer. And anyway, my dad taught me how to shoot a basketball, taught me how to throw a baseball. I will tell you one funny story. He taught me it was time I learned how to throw a curveball. So one night we went out in the backyard and we were going to play, and he was going to throw a curveball. So he showed me how to put my fingers on the ball and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my release point wasn't very good, and the ball sailed way over my dad's head. Unfortunately, we hadn't positioned ourselves very good in the yard, and that ball sailed right through our window in the front room. And let's just say Mom made sure after that we were facing a different direction when we played catch. But anyway, I'll never forget that my first attempt at throwing a curveball went through our glass window.
At what age did you become interested in sports?
Oh boy, very, very young. My dad, he was born and raised in a little town in Oregon named Reedsport, and he was an athlete. In fact, way back when in the 40s, when Dad was playing, they had already split up into multiple classes. And Reedsport was in the smallest division. But my dad played halfback and fullback on football and was a forward in basketball. They won the state championship 2 years in football and 1 year in basketball. So he was a big time athlete. And so I started our enjoyment of sports. I started at a very, very, very young age. I can take you back to the years I had the small transistor radio under my pillow at night, listening to Harry Carey and Joe Garagiola and Jack Buck do the Cardinal baseball games. And I became hooked on the Cardinals. And my dad started taking me to Illini sports when I was just a little kid. And so, as you know, today the Cardinals in Illinois are my big sports, my favorite teams. And so, yeah, I was hooked on sports from being a very small kid.
Since you played, how has the game changed?
Baseball, not as much. Baseball's still pretty much baseball. Football, basically the style of offense. Again, when I was a kid coming up, it was run, 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 run. That's all you did, and it was basically your high school, college, pros. One of the reasons I liked the old American Football League back years ago before they merged, they were much more wide open, their style of play. And so we'd come home, the games were televised on NBC, and I'd come home and watch the games rather than the NFL. Basketball's changed a bunch. It's a much faster game. When I played, we still had the short shorts and the socks pulled up clear up to our knees almost. There was no glass backboards. It was a much slower game. We were still doing the common foul and shooting one free throw back in that day. But the game is much faster. Officials today, they'll call more charging fouls in a week than officials back there probably called it a month or a season. It was just, remember the old movie Hoosiers where they said, okay, we got to make 5 passes before we shoot? That was much more like the offenses back when I played. It was much more sets that you ran. And if you scored 50 points, that was a bunch in a game, So basketball's changed a bunch.
What advice would you give to today's youth about playing sports?
Enjoy it. Unless you are ultimately skilled in one sport, don't specialize. Play as many sports as you can. Enjoy it. Work hard, have fun. One of my pet peeves is these guys, after they make a play, come out and they do this kind of stuff. I can't stand that. Don't be a jerk. Be a good citizen. Represent your community. Represent your school. Play for the name on the front of the jersey. But just enjoy yourself.
What has sports done to change your life?
Well, I've had a lot of enjoyment. Thankfully, I'm not a Cubs fan. I've had a lot more to cheer for through the years. I said that just for you, Tyler. Camaraderie, the friends that I have made through the years, and the fun that we have had together. Some of my closest friends are Cub fans. And man, we've had a lot of fun razzing and going back and forth. The friendships that are created through that. It's provided me a career. It's how I got my start. And if I had not done that and not been able to do fairly well, all the other things that have happened for me probably would have never happened. Funny how things come full circle, and now I'm back and I'm covering sports. To see the examples, I can't tell you how impressed I am with so many of the coaches that we have, especially the coaches that I cover with these 3 schools. Oh my gosh, these men and women, we are so lucky to have these folks. It's so much more than just wins and losses for these guys. They really care about your kids that are playing. They want the best for these kids. And so it is given me, and I just enjoyed playing it, and my playing days obviously are well over. It gives me the opportunity to be around something that I enjoy so much. And by covering it, I guess maybe it's a way I can give back a little bit. But yeah, sports has been a great deal to me through the years. Sports and music, they're the only 2 things that got me through school. I was not the best student. And yeah, you and I have had plenty of talks. I mean, I've never been known a sports nut like you. You take it to a whole different level. But I am definitely a sports guy.
Steve, in closing, is there anything else you would like to share through all this process?
I want to thank the people especially of Effingham and Teutopolis and throughout Effingham County. Since I started the news report 8 years ago, you guys have been great. Advertising support local businesses, and money's hard to come by. And that investment that you make with us, we take very important, and I am so appreciative. The many people that have shared their stories with us have treated us so well. We get nice comments. We do hope you enjoy the newspaper. The coaches that I work with, the kids that I cover, and the fans. We become friends with fans and stuff, and we are very lucky. The area that we're in. I've told people I get to cover a lot of wins in the sports that we cover here, but we've just got good people, good solid people that care about each other, care about community, and so just know that I am grateful to be a part of this area and be a part of what we do, and thank you for all you've done to help us.
Steve, I really enjoyed hearing your story. That was awesome what you all talked about, and I wish you nothing but the best in the future.
Great, thanks, Tyler.